So thank you all for joining. My name is Alex Duef Cohen, and I'm a VP Client Strategy at FreeMind. Today, I'm pleased to introduce two leaders in technology transfer and commercializations from the NIH. First, Steve Ferguson, who serves as a special advisor at the NIH Office of Technology Transfer, where he's been since 1990. Over the years, he's played a key role in one of the world's largest biomedical technology transfer programs, supporting a vast portfolio of licenses and helping bring dozens of FDA-approved drugs and vaccines to market. His background spans science, business, and intellectual property, and he's been widely recognized for his contribution to the field. And joining him is Dr. Michael Salgaller, who leads the Technology Analysis and Marketing Unit at the National Cancer Institute's Technology Transfer Office. With over 20 years of experience across science, business, and investment, he focuses on advancing technologies toward commercialization and building partnership with industry. He's also an author and educator in biotechnology entrepreneurship, and has published more than 70 articles and book chapters. So thank you both for being here, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Alexandra, and welcome everybody to our program today. Michael Salgaller and I are very pleased to be able to join you and tell you a little bit of a story about some of the information that you may not be aware of in terms of opportunities for your company to work with NIH. We could go to the first slide. We can go ahead and get started.
Sure. Let me get that teed up, Steve. 1 second.
So Mike and I's background is in industry before coming to tech transfer. And so I think some of the topics today that we'll cover will be things that we certainly weren't aware of in our industry, and will be something that I think you'll find very useful in terms of working with your own companies or clients. So, and the topic for today, we've entitled it Beyond SBIRs, NIH is a Technology Development Commercialization Partner. Many of you know about the SBIR program, particularly since with its reauthorization, but you probably don't know about how NIH can be a technology development and commercialization partner. So let's go ahead and get started with this, Michael, and let's go to the next slide. So first of all, we can step back and say, why business? We have business backgrounds. Why would a company, organization, why would you want to do business with NIH? Well, we are well known as the U.S. Primary Biomedical Research Agency. That's well established. You see a picture of our central clinical center in Building 10 here to the left. And we're talking about an annual budget for our programs of about $47 billion. So we thank you for your support. And about $5 billion of that is the internal R&D, and that's the programs that Michael and I represent and we'll talk to you more about today. These programs are quite large in terms of our internal efforts. We're looking at over 6,000 scientists and 12,000 staff to help support these efforts, and resulting in about 1,000 partnerships or so, give or take. And some of these partnerships are things that perhaps you're aware of, others perhaps not, and maybe we can talk to you a little bit about more of that later on after the program. These focus are in the whole spectrum, sort of biomedical research. We're talking about basic research studies, translational studies, and also clinical research discoveries. And these are activities particularly focused on our clinical center, as I mentioned. We're very active in terms of collaboration with various healthcare stakeholders, both in academia and in industry. But more importantly for us, even with our $47 billion in healthcare research, it's our partners that commercialize into products. And that's very important. That's one of the reasons that we're interested in working with companies, is because these company partners are really help us reach the goal of our healthcare mission in terms of improving healthcare for the US citizens and the general public. So there's a number of things that Michael and I could talk about today in terms of outlined here, but we're going to focus on these first two items today for you. Save the others for perhaps another program. And today we're going to talk a little bit about in-licensing of NIH technology into your organization to develop some novel products and opportunities for collaboration. And that's kind of the second bullet here in terms of how you would set up these technology collaborations, both in terms of working with materials coming from us or ideas that perhaps you have. So those are the two things today. I think you'll have some interesting ideas from this that we can talk about. But one of the things that sort of sets us apart a little bit is that we find, Michael and I talking with programs at industry and at conferences, is that there are a number of myths about working with the NIH. And I'm almost thinking that perhaps this would be could be its own episode from the Mythbusters television show that many of you have watched. Yeah. Hollywood hasn't quite called us yet, but I think we have enough things here that would make a good episode. So that's kind of what we're going to cover today a little bit. And so one of the myths that we often hear about NIH is that NIH, you do a lot of great basic research, but that's really your only focus. But in fact, we're very active in both translational and clinical efforts, and we do have, as you've seen in the picture, a clinical center, and we're very active, in fact, the world's largest holders of INDs in terms of phase 1 types of studies. The other interesting thing that we often hear about is that, gee, NIH, you do a lot of work in drug discovery and drug development, but in fact, what else do you do? Well, we cover the whole gamut, actually, in terms of medical devices, diagnostic biomarkers, med tech, and AI. It's really kind of the whole ecosystem related to technology development running healthcare and healthcare-related products. The other thing we often hear about is that, gee, NIH, you work, don't you just work with academia? Do you really work with any industry partners? In fact, we actually have hundreds of industry license agreements. We have over 2,000 active license agreements with our industry partners who have developed some of these technologies. I think the current count is like 52 FDA-approved drugs and vaccines that the FDA has approved for our partners. The other thing is that sometimes we hear about is that you're a NIH, you're a U.S. government organization. You can only work with U.S. entities. In fact, we partner internationally. Roughly about 25% of our agreements are with non-U.S. firms. And we see sort of healthcare and product development as really as an international effort. So we're very active in these types of areas, of course, in the United States, but also sort of globally. And I think the other thing we also hear about in terms of this Mythbusters episode that I mentioned is that NIH, you only develop internal ideas. And in fact, we do have some really good internal ideas in terms of that resulted in Nobel Prizes or National Academy of Medicine scientists. But in fact, the things that we work with can originate from company partners. We're very active in terms of these types of collaboration, working with ideas and projects that companies bring to us. So that's an important part of our collaborations as well. So, but the main myth, the main perception is that, gee, NIH, you're really only a funding source. And of course, many of you are familiar with our programs in the Small Business and Innovation Research, SBIR, and Small Business Technology Transfer Research, STTR programs related to the SBIR. And of course, funding is a very important part of company development, particularly very early stages, but that's not really what we're all about. There's much more here. And here, I'd like you to think a little bit more about not just the things on the left side representing the extramural side. It's certainly the largest part of the NIH program, over 80% of our $47 or $48 billion budget. And you can see there's a lot of activity supporting not only basic research and clinical research at universities through R01 grants, but also particularly with companies through the SBIR program and other contracts. But in fact, there's a whole other program that perhaps you're not familiar with, the intramural program. And while it's only 10%, that represents roughly about $5 billion of R&D. I often tell people we're the $5 billion R&D organization you didn't know you already had. That represents over 1,000 active collaboration, and we have 800 principal investigators very actively pursuing science across 27 institutes. In this situation, this results in intellectual property owned or co-owned by NIH, representing the work of our own investigators, as opposed to the extramural program where we're funding work done by other parties. In that case, the the funding recipient owns intellectual property. So these activities that we do means that you have access to technology developed through our own program, through the technology transfer efforts, or perhaps collaboration opportunities where we're doing work with you. And some of that work that we're doing is an indirect support where we're spending money on your behalf as part of the collaboration, money that you wouldn't have to spend, but still resulting in product development. The other thing sometimes we see is that universities are the only source of technology. And certainly, if you're looking for some new ideas, product line extension, or new product areas, universities are a great source. But in fact, NIH is probably should be on the top of your list as well. As I mentioned before, FDA product approvals, we only have 50. But that's larger than any other institution. And you can see that these are often areas that where venture capital is making investment, particularly in the area of oncology. That's the program that Michael particularly represents. But you can see that represent all the other major areas as well of interest for venture capital. So these are the programs that we're very active in, that venture capital is very active in. And so that's why these things result in some of the success stories that we mentioned, as I over 50 product approvals in just the last few years. So to try to distinguish this a little bit, why is our program relevant for your company? You can see that here we've kind of broken it out in terms of the SBR, which of course is important, is relevant for your small company. But also on the right-hand column, about the collaboration and licensing opportunity, which I would say are equally important as terms of projects and opportunities for your company. You can see a little bit of the difference. SBR is kind of direct funding support. Collaboration is more indirect or in kind, where we're doing types of projects with you, spending money on your behalf as we jointly work towards various products development. The funding ranges here are listed. There's a lot of flexibility in terms of collaboration licensing. It has a global perspective rather than just the US. We don't have the employee limitations or the other types of activities related to application deadlines. It's a little more flexible in terms of timelines and activities. And so I think that's something you should be considering. Is there application process? There is for a license application, but not for collaborations. Collaborations are more scientist types of work, and those don't have the deadlines or formal processes to go for. It's more being able to connect you with the right person who has equal interest in the types of technology that you are in terms of project development. In terms of activity levels, we don't have, the collaborations are selected by the investigator. The tech transfer office handles license applications and processes, which of course can be quite active. We're doing about almost 300 license agreements each year. So again, these are all processes that are well vetted, well understood in our system, and really represent an opportunity for you really to sort of leverage some of the things that you're already doing or would like to do with some of the resources and expertise here at the NIH. So in terms of the process, we can help you get started. We're looking to we can help you do a needs assessment in terms of where the matches would be in terms of the technologies and collaboration opportunities that we have. We're looking to sort of connect various knowledge gaps in healthcare. We're really looking to sort of find the space that no one's developing or hasn't developed new technologies yet to kind of meet that unmet medical need. In terms of enhancing pipeline, that's where help your company in terms of its ability to move forward. In terms of who does what, that's a discussion. Who pays for it? That's usually a discussion as well, but it's typically a shared cost, shared effort. A couple things to keep in mind. We don't want to take the place of your contract research organization. We don't want to be your CRO. Please keep your CRO. We want to do the things that perhaps the CRO isn't capable of doing, the things that are more leading edge, more novel, things that would actually lead to sort of very innovative new products coming to market. The other thing is that we also don't do sponsor research. I know sometimes collaborations with universities are focused on that because they need funding for their scientists. Our scientists are already funded by the US Congress. So in terms of our collaborations, we're not looking necessarily for you to fund the work. We're looking more about the science, about the medical opportunities to work together to solve a very important technical or scientific problem. So in terms of license agreements, as I mentioned before, we're doing about 300 a year. We have about 2,000 active, and they run the whole gamut in terms of activity levels. So it's not just therapeutics and drugs, but also a number of other interesting projects and technologies coming from our program that may fit in what you're doing or may be of interest for your work, again, to sort of address unmet medical needs. And some of the things here that we're particularly interested in are things, we have very active programs that have generated, for example, priority review vouchers for our partners. So the activities are things that are really important for us. Typically, the technologies are very early stage, as you might expect. It's actually a good match for early stage companies in terms of being able to grow the technology, grow the company together. We also have a number of research materials and research tools. So if you're looking for some things like antibodies, cell lines, animal models, no need to reinvent the wheel. If we have that for our programs, chances are we have extra available and can put that together in terms of a collaboration or a license agreement to save you some time and effort in that respect as well. In terms of collaborations, again, there's a number of possibilities here. Again, it's with a government lab at the NIH, one of our institutes. And an outside party is typically accompanied, but it can be a nonprofit or other types of organization as well. In these collaborations, the government or our laboratories provide their expertise, equipment, and materials. The collaborator can provide some and the same. And also money, if some additional money is needed to do something. Typically, this would be to help support or bring on an additional postdoc to work on the project. And the important part is that when we have these formalized agreements, that gives you the option to exclusive license from the results of the work without having to go through a competitive process. So that allows you then the work that you're doing with us, you can lock that down in terms of potential development or potential license agreement based upon some discoveries that may be made during the collaboration. And so what are some of the advantages?
Well, Steve, I thought I'd take it from here.
Let me,
right.
Yeah, go ahead, Michael, and let's talk about what are some of the advantages for some of the parties here.
Thanks, Steve. I want to mention a couple things very quickly. First, we provided our hosts with a sample deck, so you don't have to take so many notes. We provided it in PDF form, and you're welcome to distribute to any of your colleagues. So I'm very familiar with FreeMind. It's one of the world-class organizations for both government connections and non-dilutive support. And so we appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about some other ways you might be able to provide value add to your clients. So what are the advantages of turning your clients onto us, so to speak? You can access world-class scientific expertise, and unique to NIH, respectfully, as a differentiator to other universities and research institutes, is that we can bring in our sister agency, the FDA, to be part of the planning process on collaborations. Now, importantly, this does not replace any of their formal meetings with the agency. However, if we're planning to spend tax dollars on a collaboration, and there's any question about how the FDA would view, say, the studies, would they be considered eligible to go into an IND for an IND enabling studies, then we can bring them in and they can consult. We also have unique reagents and resources that your tax dollars have provided. You see some of those on the left. The software, we have hundreds and hundreds of animal models in many, many different diseases. So instead of your clients having to pay to develop them themselves or pay a mouse company or an animal model company a lot of money, they can get it to us. They can get it to us from at our cost. We also have cell lines, reagents, etc. So it's very
I think I
cost
should
effective.
stay on this, Dan.
Somebody's mic is on. Not only is it very cost and time efficient to get a tool from us, if your client, while they're doing their internal R&D, discovers any new intellectual property using a tool that they got from NIH, your client exclusively owns the rights. That's a great deal. So if they collaborate with us, it's important to mention that for all but one of our 27 institutes, we have no overhead. And I have a background that includes venture capital and also government affairs. So I know that that's somewhere between 75 and 100% better than your, your Stanfords and your Karolinskas and those type of ones. The National Cancer Institute does have what is an indirect cost, and it's capped at 15%. It's zero for the other 26 institutes. There are execution fees, milestone payments, and royalties. We try to work with small companies and try to meet them financially so that things can move forward. Now, collaborations don't always create new intellectual property, but if they do, your client would get right of first refusal to the co-owned IP between your client and NIH. And in fact, we're not allowed to start companies. And so that de-risks the opportunity for your client because we can't create a new co which would then compete with your client for that newly created IP. Very quick story. When I was with a venture capital firm, we started a great company out of Johns Hopkins. We then funded the lab of the scientist inventor $2 million to get the 2.0 version of his technology. He came up with amazing technology, and Hopkins spun out their own company and licensed it to them. So that was a $2 million lesson. That's no risk for us because we can't spin out companies. The other great opportunity with us that involves the number 0 is if you license something from us, whether it's a result of a collaboration or a straight in license, we take 0 equity. Again, there are milestone payments and royalties if it gets to market, but your clients could license something in from one of the world's greatest research institutes and your cap table stays clean. That's a pretty good deal. Now, working with your clients is a great deal for us as well. We get access to your clients' amazing technologies. We need their commercial development expertise. Our forte is not getting products to the market. So we need them to advance it through the clinic and then on to the market. A collaboration is one of the few ways we're able to accept funding. Again, it's on an as-needed basis. It's not a default. And most importantly is the satisfaction of getting medical solutions to the patients who desperately need them. So I've got a couple examples here, a couple case studies of how this works. And it involves different parts of the intramural and extramural research programs. So the first is Rakuten Medical, a company that was founded on an NIH technology out of National Cancer Institute, Drs. Choiki and Kobayashi. And it actually started with an SBIR based on an NIH technology. At that time, you could actually start and focus an SBIR around an NCI technology, and we're trying to get that program reinvigorated. So it started with an SBIR, and then they submitted a startup license, which is basically a commercial evaluation license, which we have at NCI. And that allows a company for only $5,000 to have a 1 or 2 year option while they work with the technology internally. So they worked with it internally, they liked what they were working with, and so then they executed a full license agreement with the National Cancer Institute. And they used that to then finish preclinical proof of concept studies, submit an IND, and they began their first phase 1 trial in head and neck cancer. So what NIH contributed is shown in purple. We worked with them on IND enabling studies. We provided direct funding through SBIRs. We provided in-kind support by paying for the phase 1 trial. So for example, if the phase 1 trial was $1 million, we did not award them $1 million, that's direct funding, but we paid for the trial. So we provided $1 million in-kind or indirect support. So that was $1 million that Rakuten could then use internally for other operational needs. We continued to work with them scientifically, technically, and from a regulatory standpoint. Again, they ended up executing a full license on our technology, and then we continued to work with them throughout their continued clinical development, leading to their first product approval in 2020. And in between, as a result of this work, they ended up raising what is now well over $500 million. So working with NIH can directly connect your clients to value inflection points. So I mentioned about our clinical work. We're the nation's largest hospital devoted to clinical research, first in human studies. And on a daily basis, we're actually running over 1,000 studies. So lots of other hospitals have more beds and see more patients each year, but no one runs more first-in-human trials. Those first-in-human trials could be preventative, they could be diagnostic, they could be therapeutic, they could study the disease pathogenesis, and your clients would know that it's being done in an efficient, ethical manner. What we solely run is single-site first-in-human trials, unless it's an ultra-rare condition. Just to let you know, we typically, unless it's ultra-rare, we don't get involved with trials where your client might be interested in having NCI as one of several trials in order to accrue patients faster. It's just that that's not a great use of tax dollars. Okay, so partnering with us can offer your clients significant value inflection points. I showed 2 of the many acquisitions at the very top. These were 2 firms founded on our technologies. Cargo was acquired by Concentra for $250 million just last year. Kite was acquired by Gilead for over $11 billion in 2017. Navigen was founded on our technology. They continued to work with us and started with a very healthy seed round of $9 million. And as I mentioned, Rakuten Medical, they now actually have gone almost $900 million, and we've been working with them for well over 10 years. And our technologies, either directly from us or co-developed together, have led to blockbuster sales. It's important to mention that although these organizations are very large pharmaceutical companies, and your clients are typically smaller companies, we recognize that, most of these product development examples started with a collaboration with a small company. And then once the product got to a certain point, the company grew and executed the typical sales, distribution, marketing deal with a large pharma to reach these types of worldwide sales. So as I start to wrap up, because we want to leave time for questions, step one is simply that one of your clients could contact us to see if there's a scientist inventor interested in collaborating with you or licensing one of their technologies. And so then you would reach out to the tech transfer office and the scientist inventor. And Steve and I, if need be, can help you find that right door. So Steve and I, it's important to mention, we are not the gatekeepers. We do not decide who NIH licenses to. We do not decide who NIH collaborates with, but we are the connectors. And I know that's one thing that FreeMind offers, is being excellent connectors. So the scientific inventor and the tech transfer office will discuss the opportunity together. And then if they're interested in moving forward, they'll then speak with a company and have a series of dialogues. And then the tech transfer center, tech transfer office will do a needs assessment if it's a collaboration. They'll also start doing the license agreement if it's a license, and the two sides move forward. So it's important to mention that our tech transfer office, working with the intramural program, the internal research program at NIH, it's not a special program. It's called a program, but it's not a special program. It's not a competitive application process. It's our faculty doing their work every single day, just like the other universities and research institutes that you may be affiliated with. We provide indirect support, not direct grant funding. To get started with one of your clients, we would have a phone call to discuss their technology, see if it's a technology and a strategic fit with NIH, and then what they'd like to do with us. And then Steve and I, or the relevant contact person, would try to identify an internal champion interested in working with the company. So it's important, this last bullet, to mention that this is the rate limiting step, since this is not a competitive application process. Whether a company, whether any of your clients ends up being able to collaborate with or license from NIH depends on the technology only, not how much money they can pay us to work with them. So therefore, we have what I call a commercialization-friendly business model. We view your clients as partners, not just a source of revenue. We really do want to exchange ideas and effort with them. We actually have, when it comes to licensing, a statutory preference for working with smaller businesses. So if one of your clients was looking at a license, and so was a large pharmaceutical company, as long as your company can meet the requirements of the license and has an acceptable commercialization plan, we actually have a statutory preference to license to them. As Steve mentioned, we do not do sponsored or fee-for-service research. Even if your client was Pfizer or Merck, they literally could not pay us enough to work with them. We have to have a scientific interest. And again, the intramural program provides indirect or in-kind support, extends the runway for your clients, and decreases their burn rate. So what I call the drop the mic moments, if you add up all the product sales from technologies licensed from NIH, either straight license or through a collaboration, in 2024, it comes to well over $10 billion. We take no equity. 26 of the 27 institutes have no overhead. And the one that does have overhead, it's only 15%. Your client brings their IP into the relationship, it stays theirs. They can validate their technology, move it towards the market, either preclinically and or in the clinic. We have world-renowned researchers and resources, and even in this challenging political climate, I would like to think that the prestige of NIH remains, and so working with us can raise the profile of your client. So This is important since you're working with a lot of very early stage companies. And I want to mention that you're also working with medium and large companies, and we'd love to hear from them as well. So although Steve and I are sort of focusing on earlier stage companies, we work with all the top 20 pharmas. And if you have some medium and large clients you think we could help, we'd love to talk to them as well. So importantly, is your company relevant? I actually define that by go-to-market strategy. If they see NIH as a customer, if they have either skills or tools or equipment they want to sell to NIH, while we do buy a lot of stuff, that's not Steve and my focus. So it needs to address an unmet medical need. And for us, that means it has to go, better or for worse, through some sort of regulatory approval. If your client is going to the market direct to consumer, over the counter, B2B, SaaS as a model, those are all very valid go-to-market strategies, but not relevant for NIH's intramural research program. Your companies do have to have enough people and resources to both negotiate a complex legal agreement, support their part of the work, and show how they can develop the result of that collaboration. And so this is the last slide. Again, you will have this as part of the deck that I provided to our hosts. And we're at some conferences. We know you're JP Morgan. We know you're at Bio. We know, of course, that you you're either part of or you help organize a lot of SBIR related events. What we'd like to plant the seed in your mind is to let your clients at those events know about opportunities, additional opportunities with the intramural research program. This would be additional value add you could offer your clients. And companies can submit, be awarded, and accept an SBIR and collaborate with NIH. Now, they can't use SBIR funding to pay for the collaboration, but your clients can apply for, be awarded, and receive funding from an SBIR while pursuing a collaboration or license. So with that, I will end and thank everybody for their time and attention.
Thank you very much. First, I want to apologize because there were two links in the invites, one Zoom, one Teams, and we some of us were in the Zoom and some of us were in the Teams. So for people that arrived later, there will be a recording of this. We will put that in our website, and we will send a blast about it. Now, do anyone have questions? No? Okay. So thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And again, if you're at Bio, we'll be part of the Federal Lab Consortium. We'd love to meet you or any of your clients to see if we can help you out.
Yes,
Be
thanks so
happy to.
much. Yeah, thanks so much. We both will be at Bio. Hope to see you there.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks
Great.
again.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.